Undercover boss steps into his steakhouse, stunned when a waitress whispers, "This place is a trap." Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The ones who do the work don't get the tips. The one who gets them is the manager's nephew. She said it like it was normal, her voice barely above the hum of the espresso machine, like she wasn't telling a secret but simply reciting weather. No one asked. No one checked. But that night, a man sitting quietly at a corner booth froze when he heard it. To everyone else, he was just another late customer in a worn baseball cap and a gray t-shirt. But behind the disguise sat a figure no one expected over 50, the founder and CEO of the very steakhouse chain whose neon sign flickered in the window above him. He chewed once, then set down his fork slowly, his eyes fixed not on the steak cooling on his plate but on the young waitress whose lips had just whispered a warning. This place is a trap. Outside, rain pressed against the glass, blurring the reflection of passing headlights. Inside, the steakhouse looked ordinary. Red leather booths stretched along the wall, polished wood tables gleamed under rows of glowing round lamps. The scent of grilled sirloin and buttered rolls filled the air. But beneath the comfortable glow, something was off. You could feel it in the way the staff moved, too mechanical, too drained, like their steps weren't chosen but memorized. She was different. Her green blouse was plain, her apron a little worn at the edges, but her hands moved with precision. Every plate she set down was deliberate, careful. Every refill came without a sound, the kind of service that spoke of pride, not show. And yet her eyes carried something else, a tension just behind the smile, the look of someone who had said too much before and paid for it. He leaned back in his seat, fingers tapping lightly on the table. He didn't ask her to repeat herself. He didn't need to. The words already weighed more than the stake in front of him. A trap. Not just for her, but for anyone who worked this floor. He scanned the room. Two younger servers lingered near the POS terminal, uniforms crisp, shoes polished. They weren't serving tables. They weren't carrying plates. They were waiting, hovering, watching the register like it belonged to them. Every transaction slid through their hands, every tip split or not split at their discretion. The waitress returned, placing down a small basket of warm rolls with quiet grace. Her smile reached the table, but not her eyes. He spoke softly, casual, like a stranger making small talk. "Busy night, huh? Guess the tips must be decent at this hour." Her pause lasted less than a second, but he saw it. Her hand never wavered, but her gaze shifted, just enough. She lowered her voice. "Morning shifts are worse. Only a few get anything at all." She didn't linger. She turned and moved toward another booth, her back straight, her pace unbroken. He sat still, watching her disappear into the flow of the floor, his own pulse steady but rising beneath the disguise. On paper, this branch was healthy revenues above target, turnover hidden under spreadsheets. But in this moment, in the way she whispered a warning no one else dared to hear, he saw the fracture that numbers never reveal. Some truths don't live in reports. They hide in plain sight, settling quietly in a waitress's eyes, in the silence between one table and the next. And tonight, he had just stumbled into one of them. The waitress drifted past his table again, balancing two plates with the kind of muscle memory that only came from repetition. He noticed how her shoulders tightened when she moved near the register. She never touched the terminal. She didn't even glance at it. The two younger servers, Tyler with his slicked-back hair and a faint smirk, Chase, hovering beside him, guarded that screen like it was their personal property. The CEO, still hidden under the cap and plain shirt, cut another piece of steak, chewing slowly, his eyes locked not on the food but on the floor's rhythm. Something was off. Customers were eating, tables turning, yet the energy was flat. No one joked. No one shared the quiet camaraderie you usually find during a busy shift. Instead, there was silence broken only by the buzz of the overhead lamps and the occasional scrape of silverware. When the waitress returned to refill his water, he lowered his voice. "Why don't you swipe payments yourself?" She didn't stop moving. Her hands never wavered as she lifted a glass, but her reply slid just beneath the noise of the diner. "I don't have access. The system locks me out. If your role isn't on the list, You don't get digital tips either. He tilted his head, studying her face. Who decides the list? Her eyes flicked toward the counter. Behind it, the branch manager leaned casually, laughing with a regular, his crisp shirt unwrinkled, pen clipped neatly at his pocket. He looked like the picture of competence, confident and calm. The waitress barely moved her lips. Brad, he sets up the rolls. Then she slipped away before anyone could notice she'd said a word. The CEO's jaw tightened, though his expression stayed neutral. He had designed this POS system himself years ago. Role-based access was meant for transparency, built to protect fairness. What he saw tonight wasn't a glitch, it was deliberate, a distortion wearing the mask of structure. Minutes passed. He didn't leave. Instead, he sat quietly, observing. Cassie, that was her name, stitched faintly into the apron strap, was everywhere, clearing plates, pouring coffee, folding napkins behind her back without breaking stride. She trained a nervous new hire on how to adjust orders manually, whispering instructions with patience the manager never offered. She wasn't just working, she was holding the place together. Then came something unexpected. Cassie slid a small notebook from her apron pocket, worn at the edges, the cover bent. She held it close as if it were fragile, then placed it lightly on the table while pretending to set down his check. "I needed to know I wasn't crazy," she whispered, "so I wrote it down." Oh, he opened it carefully, glancing over neat columns of dates, table numbers, totals, and tips circled in red. Each line compared the POS record with what she actually received. Margins filled with quick notes, timestamps, discrepancies. It wasn't a complaint, it was evidence. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "I've lost more than $600 this month. But what hurts more is no one asked, no one checked." He closed the notebook with quiet respect, sliding it back to her. He didn't say much, only nodded once. Inside his chest, something shifted. A business can survive low margins, even a bad review. But when its best people start believing the system doesn't see them, that's when it begins to die from the inside. He took a sip of water, letting the bitterness settle. Around him, Tyler tapped at the screen again, Chase leaning in like a guard. Customers laughed faintly at their own tables, unaware of the weight pressing down on the room. And there, in the corner booth, a man no one recognized had just decided the investigation had already begun. The notebook stayed in front of him, resting just beside the untouched steak. He didn't flip it open again. He didn't need to. Every detail Cassie had written down matched what his own eyes had been tracking since he walked in. Dates, table numbers, missing tips, it was all there, drawn in red circles like warning flares. Instinct was never enough. Not for a CEO. He needed data, and now he had it. As soon as Cassie turned toward another booth, he pulled his phone from his pocket, the motion disguised as a casual stretch. He angled the notebook discreetly, snapping photos of every page, each entry, each note in the margin, each number that proved something was wrong. Then, slipping the phone back into his jeans, he reached for a folded sticky note he always carried. In block letters, he scrawled one sentence. "Keep documenting, but don't hand this to anyone. Wait for me to return." He slid the note into the front cover of her notebook, then nudged his water glass forward just enough to hide the gesture when she came back to clear. At the counter, the manager, Brad, was still chatting with a regular posture relaxed, his laugh carrying just a little too easily. The picture of someone who thought everything was under control, but the disguise in the booth had seen enough. A movement near the register caught his attention. Tyler leaned closer to the touchscreen, fingers dancing through menus with a rhythm too fast for a part-time server. For a moment, the CEO caught a glimpse. User role settings. Not orders, not payments. Access tiers. The screen flashed, advanced access, Tyler C. He gripped his water glass a little tighter, watching without a flicker of expression. Behind him, a trainee fumbled with her tray. First week on the floor, nervous, hands trembling as she tried to enter a comp request. Cassie swooped in quietly, crouching to show her how to flag allergy info, how to correct modifiers. Her voice was calm, steady, almost protective. Then she added in a whisper, "Careful not to let Tyler help you. He won't do it for you." He heard every word. And in that moment, it was clear Cassie wasn't just keeping the diner running. She was holding the moral structure of this entire branch together, quietly, invisibly, while others stood still and let the system tilt further out of balance. Across the floor, Chase tapped the terminal and frowned. "Weird. I could log in yesterday. Today it says, restricted access. Tyler didn't even glance up. He just smiled faintly. Probably just a glitch. I'll take care of it. The CEO tilted his head slightly, expression unreadable, but in his mind the map was already forming. Create custom roles. Limit access. Redirect tip control. Clever enough, it wouldn't look like theft. It would look like configuration. His steak had gone cold, but he didn't care. He wasn't hungry anymore. He didn't need caffeine either. The weight of clarity was already pushing his blood forward. This wasn't about one server's complaint. This was about a structure bent against the very people it relied on. The rain outside had eased, but in the corner booth, a storm had already begun. He set the glass down slowly, reached for his phone again, and pressed the speed dial. "Mara," he said when the line clicked, his voice low, steady. "We have a problem. The POS system's being manipulated. I need you to go in quiet, line by line, every role assignment, every account." On the other end, Mara Lynn didn't hesitate. 7 years at his side, head of internal investigations, she knew what to do. She had dismantled 3 embezzlement rings without a headline. She only said, "Understood." He ended the call. The steakhouse hummed as if nothing had changed, but inside its system, the silent audit had already begun. Within the hour, the system at that steakhouse shifted. No one on the floor noticed. Orders kept coming in. Steaks hit the grill. Customers sipped their drinks under the soft yellow lamps. But behind the screen, the POS terminal had been switched into silent audit mode. Every tap, every adjustment, every hidden override recorded in real time without alerting a single member of staff. The CEO sat back in his booth, arms folded, watching as Tyler leaned against the counter, tapping casually at the touchscreen. To the untrained eye, he looked bored, just another server waiting on a payment. But the new audit mode tracked deeper. The first findings landed the next morning. Finding number 1, a hidden role tier labeled Preferred Internal had been created inside the system, invisible to normal staff screens, but granting full access privileges. It wasn't standard. It wasn't even legal under company policy. That tier had been applied to 3 accounts: Brad Coleman, the manager, Tyler C., the part-time server, and an account marked Kitchen Support 03. Finding number 2. In the last 30 days, digital tips totaled just over $4,800. Of that, 67% had been routed through Tyler C.'s account, even though his actual service volume was less than 15% of total tables. On paper, it looked balanced. In reality, the system had been rewritten. Finding number 3 raised an even bigger flag. Payroll listed a kitchen employee named Marcus Hill, clocked in for 21 of the last 25 mornings. But HR had no record of Marcus Hill. No tax documents, no onboarding file. The social security number attached to his ID had already been flagged in another branch 2 years ago. That case had gone cold, shelved for lack of proof. The manager of that branch back then? Brad Coleman. The final detail came from finance. A shell entity named Douglas Henderson LLC, registered out of state, had been receiving service processing fees every Friday. The amounts matched the missing tip differentials almost to the dollar. On paper, it looked like third-party logistics. In truth, the registration led directly back to an old email once used by Brad himself. Back in the steakhouse, none of this showed. Tyler still smirked by the register. Chase still hovered at his side. Cassie still worked the floor with quiet grace, folding napkins, balancing trays, training the new hire no one else bothered with. The CEO remained silent in his booth, sipping cold water, his disguise still intact. But the weight of the evidence was already gathering. What started as a whispered warning had become a network of numbers, accounts, and roles, all pointing in one direction. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to call Brad out yet. The truth was already unraveling, and soon the ones who thought they had buried it would find out just how visible it had become. For now, he sat quietly, letting the scene play out as if he were just another tired customer finishing his meal. But behind that stillness, the trap they had built was already snapping shut on them. By the time the audit team confirmed the last detail, the CEO was already back on the road. He didn't need to stay in that corner booth forever. The pictures on his phone and the data flowing from the POS were enough to tell him what kind of cancer had been growing inside his own company. 2 days later, he returned to the same steakhouse. This time, he didn't come alone. He stepped out of a silver-gray truck, no longer hiding under a cap, no longer blending in. He wore a dark jacket, pressed shirt, his posture steady and unmistakable. The rain had cleared, leaving the parking lot damp. Neon reflections stretched across the puddles. Inside, the restaurant looked the same: customers at booths, servers carrying trays, the low hum of background chatter. But for him, the room had changed. He wasn't here to observe anymore. He was here to confront. He walked past the hostess stand without giving his name. Brad glanced up from the counter, surprise flickering only for a second before smoothing back into his usual calm. "Evening? Table for one?" he asked, as though he hadn't just been caught funneling thousands of stolen dollars through a fake shell company. The CEO placed both hands on the counter. His voice was even, carrying just enough weight to cut through the air. "Number, I'm not here for dinner." Ugh. Tyler shifted uneasily near the POS terminal, his smirk faltering for the first time. Chase glanced between them, sensing the tension but not daring to step forward. Cassie stood frozen for half a beat, recognition dawning in her eyes. She looked from the man at the counter to the memory of the stranger in the booth days earlier. Brad tried to recover, adjusting his shirt cuff. "I'm not sure I understand. If you'd like to make a reservation." The CEO slid a folder onto the counter, opening it with deliberate calm. Inside were printed screenshots of the audit, role assignments, tip funnels, payroll discrepancies, bank transfers to Douglas Henderson LLC, each page more damning than the last. "You understand perfectly," he said. "You rewrote the rules. You gave your nephew advanced access. You created ghost employees, and you funneled tips into an account you control." The room quieted. Conversations dipped into silence. Forks paused midair. Customers turned their heads slowly, sensing something larger than a routine disagreement. Brad's face paled. His hand hovered near the folder but didn't touch it. "Anyone could have made those adjustments. It doesn't prove—" The CEO leaned in slightly. "It proves enough. And the audit didn't stop here. Every keystroke, every override, every fake shift. We tracked it all. Do you want me to read the numbers out loud? Or would you prefer I let every customer in this room see them?" Tyler's jaw tightened. His hands slipped from the POS terminal. Chase stepped back entirely, as if distance could protect him. Cassie held her breath, eyes wide, gripping her tray against her chest. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't invisible. The truth, she whispered, had just been spoken out loud by the only person powerful enough to fix it. The CEO straightened, his voice calm but final. "This steakhouse is not your trap anymore." The weight of the words hung heavy. Brad swallowed hard, but no excuse came. Silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the neon sign outside. And in that silence, justice began to take shape. For a long second, no one moved. The folder lay open on the counter like a verdict no one wanted to read aloud. Brad's hand twitched at his side, but he didn't reach for it. He couldn't. The evidence was too clear, the numbers too sharp. The CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply turned his gaze toward Tyler, who had spent weeks controlling the register as if it belonged to him. "You handled less than 15% of tables last month," he said evenly. "But 67% of tips went through your account. Do you want to explain that to everyone here?" Tyler's smirk collapsed. He shifted from one foot to the other, eyes darting to Brad for rescue. None came. Then the CEO turned toward the staff on the floor. Cassie stood frozen, tray clutched tight, her face pale but steady. He spoke directly to her. "You kept records, quietly, carefully. You knew something was wrong." She swallowed hard, nodding once, though her lips trembled. For the first time, her truth was being acknowledged in front of everyone. The CEO straightened, pulling a black business card from his pocket and placing it next to the folder. The silver letters caught the light. His name, his title, his company. The room shifted instantly. Guests leaned back in shock. One customer muttered under his breath, "He owns this place." Brad's shoulders slumped. The calm veneer cracked, his face draining of color. "You can't just walk in here and—" "I built this company to give people jobs, not to let managers steal from them." The CEO cut in. His tone was measured, surgical. "You're finished here. Effective immediately." "Oh." A murmur rippled through the room. Customers whispered. Staff exchanged glances, relief flickering in their eyes. Cassie's grip on her tray loosened. The CEO picked up the folder again, closing it with quiet finality. "Security will escort you out, and don't bother deleting anything. The audit already has it all. Brad opened his mouth, but no words came. Tyler stared at the floor, jaw clenched. Chase stepped further back, distancing himself from the collapse. The CEO's eyes swept the room once, calm and steady. This place isn't a trap anymore. It's going to be what it should have always been, a place where work is rewarded fairly. Cassie exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping as if a weight had finally lifted. The storm that had hung in silence over the floor had broken, and the first clear air in weeks filled the steakhouse. Brad's silence said more than any defense could. His eyes darted toward Tyler, then toward the office door in the back, as if an escape route might materialize if he just stared hard enough. But there was no exit from what had already been exposed. The CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every pair of eyes in that room was already watching. Cassie set her tray down slowly, her knuckles white from how tightly she had been gripping it. For weeks she had written everything in her notebook, pages filled with quiet proof that no one wanted to hear. And now, in front of customers, staff, and the very man who owned this chain, her truth stood on the counter in black and white. Brad finally tried. "You're making a mistake. This isn't how things work. Sometimes management needs flexibility." The CEO cut him off with a steady hand raised in the air. "Flexibility doesn't mean theft. It doesn't mean silencing the people who actually keep this place alive. You turned a restaurant into a private cash register." He turned his gaze to Tyler. "And you helped him?" Tyler's smirk was gone. He shifted from foot to foot, his confidence stripped under the weight of the evidence. "I just did what he told me," he muttered. "Exactly," the CEO replied. "You followed orders even when those orders built a system that bled your own co-workers. That's not loyalty. That's complicity." "Huh?" The customers in the booths stayed quiet, forks resting on plates, wine glasses held midair. No one dared interrupt, but every face carried the same look: shock, curiosity, and a strange satisfaction at watching justice unfold in real time. Cassie finally found her voice. It was low, but steady. "Sir, we didn't know if anyone would ever believe us. That's why I wrote it down." The CEO turned to her, and for the first time his expression softened. "You did exactly what you should have. You protected the truth until someone was willing to see it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single black business card, placing it on the counter beside the audit folder. The silver letters caught the warm glow of the overhead lamp. Jackson Reeves, founder and CEO. A ripple of realization spread through the room. The quiet man who had once sat in a corner booth, blending in with the crowd, was the reason every paycheck in this building existed. Brad's lips parted, searching for words, but nothing came. The CEO's voice carried once more, calm but final. "Effective immediately, you're done here. The accounts tied to you and your nephew are frozen. The investigation has already reached the board, and tomorrow morning, this branch will have a new manager." Tyler started to protest, but Chase put a hand on his shoulder, pulling him back. He had seen enough to know the fight was over. Cassie's eyes glistened, though she kept her posture straight. For the first time, she wasn't carrying the weight alone. The CEO looked at her again, lowering his tone just enough for her to hear. "You're not invisible anymore." And with those words, the room seemed to breathe differently. The steakhouse that had felt like a trap minutes earlier now felt like a place where the balance had finally shifted back toward fairness. Brad didn't argue again. His shoulders sagged, and the confidence that had carried him through years of hidden schemes slipped away in front of everyone. Tyler stepped back, avoiding eye contact. Chase, who had looked uneasy from the start, crossed his arms but kept silent. The air inside the steakhouse felt different now, like the lights above were brighter, the hum of the neon sign outside sharper. The CEO closed the folder and slid it off the counter. "Security will escort you out tonight. Tomorrow, HR will contact you about formal proceedings. But make no mistake, you won't be back in this building." A hush settled across the floor. Customers stared openly now, not pretending to be discreet. They had walked in expecting dinner. Instead, they had witnessed something else, a reckoning disguised as a meal. Cassie remained near the counter, still clutching her apron. She didn't smile, not yet. Relief came slow after weeks of carrying the weight alone. The CEO turned to her, his voice lowering. "You've been holding this branch together. Starting tomorrow, you'll have a different role, training lead for new staff. No one deserves it more." Her breath caught, eyes widening just slightly before she nodded. She didn't thank him out loud. The gratitude sat in her expression, quiet but unmistakable. The CEO looked at the rest of the crew. This place isn't shutting down, but it will be rebuilt the right way. Every tip logged correctly, every account visible. The system is only as strong as the trust behind it. One of the younger customers in a booth clapped once before catching himself. Others exchanged nods, small murmurs of agreement passing between tables. It wasn't loud applause, but it was recognition, the kind that meant people understood fairness had just walked into the room. Brad finally moved, turning toward the door with stiff steps. No one followed him. Even Tyler hesitated before trailing behind, his smirk completely gone. Chase lingered a moment longer, then shook his head and left as well. Their departure wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, heavy, the kind of silence that carries its own judgment. The CEO stood for a moment, surveying the space, the booths, the tables, the servers who still looked uncertain. He wanted them to see what he saw. Not a trap, not anymore, but a chance to reset. He reached for his phone and dialed a number. When the line clicked, his words were simple. Activate the reset protocol for Branch 17. Full audit transparency, new manager onboarding, role assignment scrubbed, effective immediately. Understood, came the reply. He ended the call, slipping the phone back into his jacket. Then he turned one last time to Cassie. Tonight you told the truth, even when it was dangerous. That's how change starts. Her eyes met his, steady now. It's all I could do. It was enough, he said. For a long moment, the steakhouse was quiet, except for the faint clink of glasses and the low hum of the kitchen. Then, slowly, the room exhaled. Conversations resumed. A customer raised his glass toward Cassie. Another gave a small nod to the CEO. The ordinary sounds of dinner returned, but with a new undercurrent, trust replacing tension. The trap was gone. What remained was the beginning of something better. The CEO didn't linger in the steakhouse much longer. His presence had already redrawn the lines, and the people inside knew it. He walked toward the door slowly, not in triumph, but in silence, as though each step carried the weight of what had been uncovered. Cassie stood near the counter, notebook still tucked in her apron, watching him leave with an expression caught between disbelief and relief. Outside, the night was cool, the pavement damp from earlier rain. The neon sign above flickered faintly, its reflection shimmering across puddles on the asphalt. For weeks, that glow had lit up a place that felt like a cage. Tonight, it looked different. Not perfect, not fixed, but no longer a trap. He paused by his truck, glancing back through the glass windows. Inside, customers were eating again. The tension had lifted, replaced by a quieter hum of normalcy. Servers moved between tables without the shadow of Tyler or Brad hovering at the register. For the first time in months, the floor felt balanced. He opened the driver's side door, sliding into the seat. His phone buzzed once. A message from Mara. Audit complete. Roll tier deleted. Ghost account disabled. Fraudulent transfers flagged. System clean. He exhaled, a sound less like relief and more like resolve. Problems like this never vanish overnight. But the truth was no longer buried, and that was enough to start. The engine rumbled to life. He rested his hands on the wheel, eyes still on the diner. For years, he had told managers that numbers were important, but people were the core. Tonight proved it again. A business doesn't collapse because of bad food or slow nights. It collapses when good people stop believing the system sees them. Cassie had refused to be erased. She had written everything down, line after line, until someone finally looked. And because of that, the steakhouse would survive not because of him alone, but because someone on the inside had chosen integrity over silence. He shifted into gear, pulling slowly out of the lot. The headlights cut across the wet asphalt, the sign of the steakhouse shrinking in the rearview mirror. His voice came low, steady, not to anyone in particular, but to the memory of what had just happened. A restaurant should never be a trap. It should be trust on a plate. The road opened ahead, empty under the glow of scattered streetlights. He didn't need applause. He didn't need headlines. Leadership wasn't about being seen. It was about showing up when no one expected it and setting things right. Behind him, inside the steakhouse, Cassie picked up her notebook one last time before slipping it into her bag. This time, she didn't carry it like a shield. She carried it like a record of what she'd survived. Tomorrow would bring new managers, new systems, maybe even a new title. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, She allowed herself a small, genuine smile. And with that, the story closed not on scandal or spectacle, but on something quieter, justice restored in silence. Fairness stitched back into the fabric of an ordinary room where people came only to eat, talk, and feel human again. Some endings don't echo through headlines. They settle in the stillness after a storm, in the warmth of a waitress's smile, in the certainty that dignity matters even when no one is watching. That was enough.